Thanks for joining us for today's episode of The Capitalist Investor. As always, you got Mark in Diamond Hands D.
Mark, what's going on?
What's up, buddy? Happy birthday.
Oh, hey, thanks.
You old fogey.
I'm the old man of the show now, 41.
Couple months older than me.
Yeah, I feel like I'm 100.
I know, so do I. Have you, I don't know if maybe it's just me. Dude, I haven't stretched so much in my entire life as I have over the course of the past year or so.
No,
my body just hurts all the time.
And even like playing golf, I haven't played a whole lot of golf, but even after a round of golf, I have to stretch before and after.
Yeah.
Sometimes Advil is involved.
It's tough, man.
It is. It's rough getting old.
Body's breaking down. You got to do some yoga, find that fountain of youth, you know?
Exactly.
All right, my man. So today we are going to do the first part of a two-parter. And we're going to be breaking down over the course of the next 2 weeks the 7 ways Biden plans to tax the quote-unquote rich,
Yep.
but also the not-so-rich. Because all of these tax rules, they seem to be dipping lower and lower and lower into the middle class.
Right.
Right.
For sure. I think it's, without even getting into, the political debate side and, what should the government be spending money on and what should they not be spending money on. But I think just really kind of in general, if you look at the Democratic kind of tax and spend policies that we've seen through our lifetime, they always start off taxing the rich. Right?
Oh, yeah.
That's how it always starts. Don't worry about it. If you are, below a certain threshold, you're not going to be taxed at all,
Yeah.
right? You do a quick little back of the napkin calculation on, what you're trying to raise as far as new revenue versus what you're trying to spend. And you're like, oh, well, I don't think that's going to cover it.
Yeah.
So then you just go lower and lower and lower into the tax bracket. And pretty soon everyone's taxes have been raised.
Yep, exactly.
And, I think that's really kind of where we're at right now. We're in the proposal stage.
Right. So what we've had so far is Biden's his asking price, his listing price, right? It's very unlikely that all of his requests are going to go through.
Right.
There's going to be some compromise. There's no way we're going to be in 2022 where we were in 2018.
Right.
Right. So, there's definitely going to be some changes.
Yep.
So I think probably what's best for us to do is kind of go through what the proposals are right now and then maybe back into what we think is actually going to happen.
Yep.
I think that's probably the most effective way to go through this. But Dee, before we even get into knocking out the first 2 or 3 of the 7 ways, let's kind of go through the background, because the big thing on the docket right now is Biden's $6 trillion budget proposal.
Right.
Right. So he's proposing $6 trillion. It looks like 4.6 trillion of that 6 trillion is going to be covered via higher taxes on corporations, capital gains tax, high earners, all that stuff, which still, as you said, leaves us with a $1.4 trillion deficit. So do you start to dip even deeper? As you're raising taxes, it's very surprising that you would be running such a large deficit still. Right. So the 1.4 trillion gets added to the deficit, and that's obviously a pretty serious issue.
Yeah. It's becoming more and more and more of an issue as time goes on. Obviously, we're hopefully coming out of a pandemic here. There seems to be no one out there, maybe a couple fringe Republicans, who is actively talking about cutting the budget, right?
Yeah.
We're just in this spend mode, this recovery mode from coronavirus. It is spend, spend, spend. And, I've seen Biden say a couple times that basically all economists are saying deficit spending is the way to get out of this hole.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about deficit spending and getting out of a hole, because what I see happening right now is what I think is the biggest game of musical chairs in the history of this country. All fun and good while the music's playing, and then the music stops, and what happens, D? Someone's missing a chair.
Someone's not going to be able to get a chair.
Someone doesn't get a chair. And what happens to the other people who get chairs? They're
good.
frantically trying to get them, right? Mm-hmm. They end up in a chair and they're fine once they get it. But man, it's high stress trying to get into that chair.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So the music's playing right now. You got stimmy checks flowing in. You got excessive and disincentivizing unemployment benefits that are causing people to either just sit on their couch rather than go to work, or a lot of them are now making the argument. They're digging their heels in saying, there's no way I'm ever going to work for that low of a wage again. How do you expect me to make a living earning that measly little paycheck, right? So now all of a sudden they've got higher standards. But, to back up the truck a little bit, whoever said a 40-hour work week is deserving of the lifestyle that anybody wants to live. I mean, I remember when I started in this business, I was waiting tables on nights and weekends because I had no money. I was trying to build a client base, and I had to do what I had to do.
Right.
So, that's an entitlement mentality that's toxic. So you got this big game of musical chairs. As soon as the music stops, that is the stimmy checks and all the fiscal stimulus and all that stuff, as soon as it stops, things get ugly. All right? And what you're seeing in 2021 is that the U.S. government, the fiscal thrust from the U.S. government as a percentage of GDP is projected to be over 11% of GDP this year. Next year, it's projected to be like 2.5% to 3% if all the Biden stuff goes through, as is, right? I don't think it will. So I think it's actually going to be less than that, which means you are going to have a serious fiscal cliff. So you're actually going to have fiscal drag next year. That's like you're pulling the needle out of the junkie's arm.
Right.
Like that leads to withdrawals. That leads to a hangover. That is bad. It's not good. So everyone's talking about reopening, how great it is. I don't think anyone's looking far enough down the road to realize that, I'm going to go off tangent here.
Do it.
I was on vacation this past weekend, and I was flipping through the channels at the hotel, came across A&E. They are running biographies on all of the WWF wrestlers from our childhood.
I love it. I've watched them all.
Oh, my God. They're amazing. They're so good. Dude, they all died. They're all dead except for Hulk Hogan.
Yep.
It's amazing. So I was watching The Ultimate Warrior because he was like the man. And then you didn't know if he got bit by a snake and died. Like no one really knew what happened, right? And it turns out he got, he demanded more money, and then he got busted for growth hormone and steroids. And then when he returned, everyone was questioning whether or not it was the same
guy,
quote unquote actor.
Right.
It was the same dude. He was deflated.
Right.
That's what's going to happen to the economy. We're shooting the economy up with steroids and growth hormone, and all of a sudden you take it away, and we've all seen those kinds of people shrivel up.
Right.
So, but by the way, if you have not watched those, you should watch every single one of them.
And that was probably the greatest analogy of the history of the show. That was awesome. It was really
I'll tell
good.
you, man.
And right off the top of his head, it was awesome.
I had tears in my eyes watching Ultimate Warrior, Roddy Piper.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I didn't get to see Hulk Hogan. What did I watch? Cactus Jack, whatever the heck, Mick Foley.
Yep.
Great stuff, man. Great stuff. I mean, it gave an inside look as to how all that stuff was going down, kind of the politics inside wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
As well as a lot of just the power struggles.
It's great stuff. And like Roddy Piper was, like he was exiting as I started watching that, but his story is ridiculous.
Oh, my God.
Did you see that one with he basically grew up on the streets.
Yeah.
Just an incredible story.
Yeah. So watch those A&E, the WWE or WWF as we remember them, the biographies. All right, so getting back to this stuff, that's what I see happening to the economy. You're going to pull the steroid needle out of someone's arm, and we're going to see a fiscal cliff next year.
Yep,
Okay?
it's gonna. That's what I think a lot of people in the know have been saying for a while. The real unwinding of all of this is going to be painful.
Very painful. Very painful. This will be the second biggest fiscal cliff in the history of the United States.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people are seeing it coming. I think a lot of people are focused on booking vacations and, spending money and all this stuff. But like I said, unwinding is going to be painful. And we, as investors, people listening to this right now, it's going to be important to make sure that you are positioned properly in your overall financial plan to come out of this. Maybe unscathed is the wrong word, but as protected as possible.
Yes, and D, I think the other thing is we've talked in the past about the difference between a financial plan and financial planning. Mm-hmm. This is where planning becomes important.
Right.
Because like every year, dude, we're going to have to come up with new tax strategies to try and mitigate some of these hikes.
Yeah.
You know, maybe postponing the sale of some stocks, or I work with a lot of business owners suggesting that they might not want to sell. Like it's crazy to think that, but you know, there's a lot of things that need to be considered, and we're going to be, you know, shifting gears from year to year, trying to mitigate these taxes.
Absolutely. And, you know, when you're talking taxes, if you're basing your entire financial plan on current tax laws, you're really missing the ball there. You need to have a financial plan that can look at multiple scenarios, because the last thing you want to do is plan your retirement looking good under current tax laws, but then, you know, the next fiscal cliff happens, suddenly taxes go up pretty significantly, and now we're stuck either spending less or, you know, drawing down on our assets earlier.
No doubt. All right, so let's get into since we went on a WWE tangent today,
right? Which I think was awesome.
Yeah, of course, it was necessary. If that's the only takeaway everyone has, I'll be happy. Yeah. You know, please go watch that stuff. It's excellent. All right, so let's get into the first 2 of 7 today, and then we'll knock out the next 5 next week.
Perfect.
All right, so getting into number 1, the first tax hike is to increase the top income tax rate.
Right.
Okay, so it's currently at 37%. President Biden wants to increase it to 39.6%. And that's the exact opposite of what President Trump did from the Obama era.
Right.
So he lowered it from 39.6 to 37. Now Biden would like to hike it back up from 37 to 39.6. Of course, on top of that, you've got the Affordable Care Act number as well.
Right. So that's the kind of the Obamacare surcharge tax, which is 3.8%.
I believe, yeah.
So if your income is over $250,000, you know, multiple numbers getting thrown out here, but you're subject to that tax as well. So that top bracket technically is 3.8% higher than the 39.6.
Yep. And so, you know, in the past, President Biden was very unclear about this, but he said families making less than $400,000 a year would see no increase.
Right.
Well, it turns out that's only if you're married filing jointly, right? So single filers are going to be at $200,000, and I know families where they're single filers, right? I mean, you got a single parent family with children,
right?
That's a family. Just because there's not another spouse, that's still a family, right? Now, they'd be filing head of household, which is a little different, but nonetheless, they are not married filing jointly. So that is a different number from 400,000.
Correct.
Have you seen anything for the lower tax brackets at this point?
No. So that's a great point. So, you know, right now, really the tax increases being discussed are directly related to those 2 bills that we talked about. So basically the infrastructure bill, which I think last count was only actually 10% actual infrastructure.
Yep.
And then the family cares plan, which is his kind of tax the rich plan, which goes to basically education and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's nothing out there right now about increasing the brackets or anything like that. However, you know, it's important to note, and it's kind of crazy how time flies, because I feel like we were just doing a presentation about the President Trump tax cuts,
yeah,
and now we're talking about them expiring. So that would really be the next thing that would have to happen. So essentially, the Trump tax cuts, they're good until the end of 2025.
Yep.
So at the end of 2025, if there's no new legislation passed, essentially the Trump tax brackets go back to the Obama level tax brackets.
Right.
So that's obviously the highest tax bracket is would already have been in there if these new proposals pass. But a lot of people don't realize, the Trump tax cuts did make a pretty big chunk. It took quite a bit out of the middle brackets.
Yep.
So, moving from like 15 to 12% and things like that. So if those expire, then there's a whole new set of kind of across the board tax increases from what we're used to right now. So that's an important point. But as of right now, there's nothing out there about increasing those brackets right now.
Okay. So let's assume this happens. All right. What is the economic impact here? Because the way I see it is the people in the highest tax bracket are typically the job providers of the economy.
Right.
The people who are the business owners who aren't always making, they're not always cash flowing that money.
Right.
It's common that their tax return might show they're making X dollars, but they might only be receiving half of X, and the other half is staying in the business to grow the business.
Right. For
the good of every single one of their 20, 50, 250,000 employees, right? It's for the greater good. What I see happening is when you tax the wealthiest people, my take is that will slow job growth. That will slow economic growth.
Yep, absolutely.
And it disincentivizes people from working harder and wanting to grow their business faster.
Yep. It's a much smaller scale to the kind of the Ronald Reagan mentality back when he was making movies. Remember, he only made one movie a year because the highest tax bracket was something ridiculous, like 90%.
Yeah.
So he basically made one movie and then stopped working because if he made a second one, he's only getting 10% or less of the revenue from there. So, yeah, absolutely, it disincentivizes.
All right. I mean, then you throw in like California state tax, right? I mean, you start to throw in state tax on top of that, and it gets pretty ugly really fast.
Right.
To the point where there will be a lot of states where you are paying more than 50% in tax.
Yep.
Right. All right, let's move on to number 2, which is the one that I probably have the biggest issue with. Right. Which is raising the capital gains tax.
Right.
So the capital gains tax has been at 0, 15, or 20%. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people have been paying 0% capital gains tax. On top of the 20%, though, is the 3.8% Obamacare tax as well.
Yep.
So a lot of the highest earners have been paying 23.8%.
Right.
Right. What President Biden is proposing is essentially taking the 23.8 up to 43.8. Is that right? 43.4.
Yes, that is right.
43.4% because we're working off 39.6. Okay. All right. So a significant increase to the capital gains tax.
Yep.
Significant. And a couple things I want to mention here. So the first thing is every single academic study under the sun, D, tells you that if you raise the capital gains rate above 28%, it actually generates less tax revenue for the government. Any idea why?
Because people aren't going to sell.
That's a good point. Okay. People are going to postpone the sale of highly appreciated securities.
Right.
Right. That's not just publicly traded securities. That's a guy's $10 million business he owns as well that employs 30 people. Right.
Yep.
Furthermore, as soon as the capital gains rate is projected to go up, all of those stocks you own are going to sell off.
Right.
So they're going to be down 10, 20%. And nobody wants to sell something when it's 20% off its peak.
Right.
So that further delays the taking of any profits. So anything above 28% academically, historically, has generated less tax revenue for the U.S. government. So the very first thing I want to say here is I don't think this gets to 43.4.
Right.
But I do think it gets to 28.
Yep.
I think that's where the compromise is going to lie, which is still a substantial hike, dude. We're talking about going from 20% to 28. And then I've also heard that it would go to 28 plus the 3.4.
Right.
Okay. So we go from 23.8 to whatever, 31.4, whatever it comes out to.
So right now the proposal is for only people making over $1 million in income. What do you think that is going to stay in there? Do you think there's going to be new tiers? Have you even thought about it at all?
All right, man. There's no way. He's been so vague about the $400,000 thing.
Right.
It sounds to me like he's just eliminating the capital gains and dividend tax altogether. And he wants you to take all of your income as earned income.
Right.
That's what it sounds like to me. But because he's going to the 39.6 plus the 3.8 for those top earners.
Right.
So throughout the marginal tax bracket, there is an incentive for a capital gain over earned income. So if you're in the 12% income tax bracket, your capital gains rate is 0%.
Right.
If you're in the 22% bracket, your capital gains rate is 15. It's always more advantageous for you to take the capital gain over the earned income whenever, wherever possible, assuming it's doable, right? I find it hard to believe that this change doesn't go through the entire tax brackets. I mean, what do you think?
I'm in complete agreement with you. So whether it's this pass or something else, there aren't a lot of people in this country making over $1 million. I looked it up, is 0.3%.
Yep.
So 0.3% of taxpayers are going to be affected by this as it currently stands. So it's either one, really just for show, for political purposes, or two, it's going to change and it's going to get worse.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, we work with some executives, we work with some business owners. They're going to have a big problem if this goes to 43.4. Because, look, I work with some business owners that are making less than $1 million a year. But when they sell their business to retire for $10 million bucks, now they got to recalibrate, and they might have to work another 5 years and sell it for $15 million. Like, that sucks, dude.
Yeah, that's not cool.
And look, I don't want people to think I'm crying for someone who cashes out with $15 million bucks. I'm just saying some people have a retirement plan in place. How would you like to be 60 years old thinking you can check out at 62, and now you find out you got to go till you're 66?
Just because of one new tax law.
Right. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. And if this is true, that this abruptly skyrockets at $1 million, that's awful. Like, if he wants to go that high over the course of 20 or 50 million, that'd be one thing, but this is really going to hurt business owners, our clients that have stock options and stuff like that. Like, that's not good, man. Not good.
There's also talk of it being retroactive.
Oh my God, that's the other thing I wanted to mention. That's brutal. That's never happened in the history of the U.S. tax code.
Never happened. Nope. So
how do you do that?
People are making decisions based on today's tax law, and then you're going to say, "Oh, this new, by the way, this new rule, we're going to make it retroactive."
Starts on April 28th or whatever arbitrary date they picked.
Right, exactly. It's not fair. You have to have some fairness when you're thinking about these changes.
Right. I mean, so going back to that business owner example, the guy, he wants to sell his business next year for $10 million.
Yep.
Maybe he'll sell on December 15th for $9 million. Rather, because the alternative would be he's now got to work a few more years and sell for a much higher amount. You need to give people an opportunity to at least plan financially and plan tax-wise.
Right.
You have to.
Got to do it.
So that is Biden's proposal. I do not think that's going to happen. I think it will happen whenever this is passed. I think it will happen that day. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, dude. But if it's passed on September 15th, I think that'll be the date. I don't think he's going to go backwards, but I also don't think he's going to give people a few months to plan and have it kick in on January 1st.
I completely agree with you.
All right. Honestly, there's not a single one that ruffles my feathers more than that one.
Yep.
All right, so that's it for today's show. We knocked out the first 2 of 7 ways Biden plans to tax the rich and not so rich. And next week, We'll knock out the next 5. As always, if you have any questions, hit us with an email, info@swpconnect.com. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about it. Write us a review. Shoot us an email. We'll get you some swag. As always, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week.
The opinions expressed in the podcast are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any investment, legal, financial, or tax strategy. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. Please consult a qualified professional about your individual needs.